Okay, well, I'm Justine, and yeah, I guess I'm a sea kayaking addict. And yeah, I've been kayaking for a long time, and this picture is actually from Wales, North Wales, where I lived for 15 years and where I guess I learned a lot of my sea kayaking. And I also made a good living, I guess, as making sea kayaking films. And so I'm going to start by showing you an introduction to one of the films.
Yes, I'm living in a Western lifestyle where people run around us stressed all of the time. It's hard to take a step at a time when you're always at least 2 steps behind. Time moves so fast, yet we move so slow. No, we don't even know where we want to go. We move so fast, yet time moves so slow. No, we don't even know where we want to go. Don't you know there's only one life that I've got for me? There's so many things that I still want to see. There's only one life that I've got, you see. And I just want to live in peace and harmony. I am just a little fish in the sea. So many places I have never been. Don't want to take my life and toss it away. So many things that I still have to say. Time moves so fast, yet we move so slow. No, we don't even know where we want to go. We move so fast, yet time moves so slow. No, we don't even know where we want to go. Don't you know there's only one life that I got for me? And there's so many things that I still want to see. There's only one life that I've got, you see. And I just want to live in peace and harmony. There's only one life that I've got for me. And there's so many things that I still want to see. There's only one life that I've got, you see. And I just want to live in peace and harmony. The sun is down, but soon it must come up. Yeah, we would not let the sun go down. That sun is all we got, all we got.
See ya.
Okay, so yeah, I made a series of different films and did a lot of kayaking, but I didn't actually start kayaking until I left university. At school and university, I played a lot of team sports, including hockey. Hockey was my favorite. I actually played for English universities. Yeah, I was big into that. And then when I left university, my best friend dragged me along to our local kayaking club, which was the island of Jersey, which is south of the UK. And yeah, I was kind of hooked on adventure. I gave up hockey and just kind of fully embraced the outdoors. I've also enjoy any real form of exercise and journeying outside. The same friend that dragged me to the canoe club in Jersey dragged me on biking trips. The shot there of us biking was we just cycled across Scotland. On the right there was climbing in the Lofoten Islands in Norway. That was a climbing and kayaking trip. Went to Greenland on a ski mountaineering trip with a bunch of ladies. Yeah, so I generally love adventure, but sea kayaking is my favorite, and it's the one I'm best at. So it's the one where I can go under my own terms, go exploring. I love the fact that kayaks, you can fit in 3 weeks or more food, be fully self-contained, don't even leave footprints. You know, it's a great fit for me. I also enjoy the excitement and the adrenaline of surfing waves, this is a tidal race in Wales, where I really learned how to paddle. Yeah, it's a great fit for me. So yeah, I moved to North Wales after I've been kayaking for about 1.5 years. And on the island of Anglesey, it was an amazing place. There were lots of people there that were really good at kayaking, really passionate, did lots of things. And so I learned fast with a great safety net. And I got to the stage where I kind of wanted to be making a few more choices myself. So what would happen is I'd go out with my friends and things would start to go wrong, and then they would just totally take over, even if they had agreed beforehand that I could make the decisions. And so I decided, you know what, I think I'm ready to go on a solo trip somewhere a bit more challenging, where I'm basically the only person that can make choices. And so I decided to go to Iceland and kayak around the West Fjords, which is the kind of bit that sticks out on the northwest corner of Iceland there. And I figured, you know what, I know enough not to kill myself, and so it'll be a great learning opportunity. I flew to Iceland with a 3-piece kayak, and everyone always says, you know, before you go on a new trip, make sure that you try all your equipment beforehand. Nothing can go wrong. And well, I picked up the 3-piece kayak half an hour after I was meant to have left to drive to the airport. So I definitely, just because it wasn't ready, so I didn't have any chance to try it beforehand. So I'm at the start of my trip, and I was trying to bolt this thing together, and I'd just been told to tighten the bolts until you hear a crack. And I thought, oh, that does not sound good. So I was pretty nervous putting it together. And by the time I got on the sea for the first time, it was kind of 8 o'clock at night, which again was probably not a good idea. It didn't really get dark in Iceland that time of year in August. So it was kind of all right. I just wanted to get on the water for a short time just to check everything worked fine. And everything worked fine in the kayak, nothing leaked. I got on shore, I landed. But when I landed, I got my stove out. I thought, great, I'm going to cook my first meal. And the stove didn't work. And I realized that all the previous trips that I had been on, I had never been in charge of the stove. Someone else had always dealt with that. If it had gone wrong, someone else fixed it. And so already on my first night, I was learning, I was growing, I was having to deal with new challenges. And it took me 2 hours, but I got that stove going and I had my first hot meal. And I felt like, great, the trip's already been a success. You know, I've already learned stuff. So really pushed myself in ways that I hadn't expected. So Iceland's beautiful. The West Fjords are stunning, but as you can see, there's really not very many places to land. There's a pretty committing coastline. And again, the next day I was paddling along and the wind picked up behind me and I thought, this is great. I'm surfing along. And I thought, where do I land? I thought, oh, there's a beach right ahead of me. So I went and I landed on that beach. And it didn't occur to me that if the wind was blowing behind me to that beach, that there was going to be surf on the beach. That seems really obvious to me now, but at that stage it was not obvious to me until I got there and I was like, oh, there's waves. This is kind of bouncy. But again, it was fine. I landed there. There was a cabin I could stay in. All was good, and I carried on. And the nice thing was, in Iceland, there's no real sort of tide or current tables like there are in other places. So you have to just kind of really guess what's happening. So I was trying to figure out what was going on with the currents. And on previous trips that I'd done with friends that were, you know, maybe didn't want to stop, I'd get to a headland and I didn't really know what was happening. But in Iceland, I was by myself. So get to a headland, what's going on with the current? I'm not sure. I'm going to stop and I'm going to see which way I drift. So it was a really great trip for learning all sorts of different things. Being by myself, I had to figure out ways to bring the kayak up. So I would often try to land on seaweed if I could see seaweed, and getting bits of wood to pull the kayak up and then unload it was great as well. So it was a beautiful trip. I was loving it, learning lots and lots. Then I came to the most challenging part of the West Fjords, which is the very committing headlands on the very northwest tip of the island. And by this stage, I was feeling pretty confident. Everything was going really well. Off I set. And the weather forecast was not as expected. And neither were the currents. And I ended up going around this big rocky headland. You can see nowhere really to land. And I ended up in this big tidal rip. And the waves were breaking around me. And I was really quite nervous. I was scared because the worst thing was I hadn't expected it. I thought I'd figured out what was going on with the currents. I thought I was there around about slack current. But no, I was there and there was quite a strong current, luckily with me, pushing me forward, but there were breaking waves. And yeah, it was really, really intimidating. And I thought, oh, it's okay. Got my VHF radio, got my flares, I've got my whistle, got all the things everyone said that you should have. And then I look around and I'm like, there's nobody here. There's nobody to hear me if I call on the radio or if I shoot up a flare. I'm really by myself here. And again, that was an intimidating feeling. But then I just thought, you know what? I play in these waves in Wales. This is like a playground for me. If I just relax, don't think about the exposure, don't think about being by myself, I just think about the sea conditions, I can handle it. And I just have to keep paddling and get round and I'm going to be fine. And that's exactly what happened. So that was a great lesson for me. Of several lessons. One was don't underestimate things, you know, just be prepared for the unexpected. And two, I could cope with it. I could cope with the rough seas. And I carried on. I went around a bit further and I found this little place where I could land. You can see the committing cliffs there. There's really not many options, but I found this little spot that I could land. And I must have been nervous because I did one of the biggest poos I've ever done in my life when I landed there. Yeah, I was probably quite glad to get away from there after there as well. But yeah, so that was just indication of how nervous I was, but how happy I was that I had overcome it. So I carried on and I ended up landing at one little community in the West Fjords. And there's no kind of road access to this community. It's just by boat and it's not a permanent settlement. People just live there in the summer. And I was just lucky that everyone else had left except for this one couple. And this lady, Betty, and her husband were there and they were leaving the very next day. So it felt kind of serendipitous that they were still there. And I turned up a bit wet and bedraggled because I just had this sort of scary morning. And they invited me into their home and they didn't speak much English at all. And I didn't speak Icelandic. So they basically put all this different food out on the table. They made me tea and coffee because they didn't know which one I wanted. And you can see my pogies and my socks kind of drying on their radiator. They were just lovely, lovely people. And at one point I'm sitting there eating and drinking and the lady Betty goes up and she gets on the phone. She's chatting on the phone in Icelandic and then she hands it over to me. I'm a bit confused. I take the phone and I'm like, hello? And this voice says, my mother would like to know if there is anything that you would like. And I just thought that was so lovely. Really, really touching. And I'm like, you know, she's looking after me beautifully. Thank you. It's wonderful. And she really did. And she even gave me a pair of her heavily darned Icelandic wool socks to put on at the end because my socks were a bit wet. So yeah, beautiful interaction with people. And this was one of the first trips that I did. And really it set the tone for traveling around the world. You know, I've traveled all over the place and amazing places, beautiful scenery, but what still sticks with me really is the people that I've met and being able to share in their life and them being interested in my journey. And yeah, really see the best of people when you travel in that way. You know, the news these days is always negative, but I've really seen amazing people and having amazing hospitality everywhere that I've traveled. And so Iceland was an amazing trip for me. And this was another day where I landed at a different community and I just took the day off. I decided I wanted to walk up to this glacier. And that was another great thing about the trip, being by myself, is just I could just do that. I could decide, okay, today I'm going to take a hike. Tomorrow I'm going to paddle really hard all day. The next day I'm going to take a half day. So it was a beautiful way just to sort of become aware of what I like to do and sort of be one with myself in the place. So that was amazing, really amazing journey. So I actually, when I left university, I went traveling and then I was a TV journalist, a news reporter for a while. And then I worked as a multi-skilled program maker. And so when I started getting into kayaking and adventures, it didn't take me long to decide that I wanted to quit my job and try to make a living making films of my own trips and journeys. And so that's what I started doing almost 20 years ago now. And yeah, This Is the Sea 2 came out, I think, in probably, almost 20 years ago. So This Is the Sea 1. And so back then, I just wanted to show people what sea kayaking was about, you know. It was before GoPros, it was before YouTube was so popular, before social media or anything like that. And at the time, this was my camera setup. Obviously, I had video cameras that I used on the land, but in that box, there's a video recorder. The top of that pole is a little camera. I had a little microphone, I had a little monitor so I could see what I was filming. It was a cumbersome piece of equipment. It was expensive and it always broke down. But back then, there was no other real way to do it. So it was pretty cool because the videos were the kind of first of their kind where you could kind of see those on camera, on kayak shots, which are now pretty common. And this is Nigel Foster. I did some filming with him for the first video in Deception Pass. So yeah, the video was almost done, but I wanted a kind of a fun introduction. And so this is me and two of my friends, and the video starts off with like, sea kayaking, isn't that men with beards getting close to nature? And of course I have nothing against men with beards getting close to nature, but we just wanted to shake it up a bit. And so the next shot, you see me and my friends in our bikinis, and it's like, not always. And then me and my friends are basically surfing in one of the tidal races in Wales in our bikinis. So just to try and mix it up a bit and say sea kayaking can be all sorts of things and whatever you want. And the funny thing was, well, there's a couple of funny things about this. The first one is that by the time I got around to filming it, it was February, and February in Wales is really cold. So I'm really grateful to Tris and Gemma for donning their bras and basically coming out paddling in the tidal races. And the second thing was, I asked Sea Kayaker magazine if they wanted to sponsor the film. And they were like, well, we think it's great, we love it, but we can't sponsor the film because you're not wearing PFDs in the opening scene. So we can't be seen to sponsor something like that. And my response definitely should have been, you need to look a bit closer. I definitely got a bit of personal flotation in there, but I'm not sure that would have worked. And it was fine. The video went on and lots of people liked it. So after that trip, I was kind of hooked on sea kayaking journeys very quickly. And my next trip was in Kamchatka, which is in Far Eastern Russia. And I asked my friend Hadass from Israel if she would join me. And we kayaked from Petropavlovsk to Ust-Kamchatsk on the east coast there. And it's about 630 kilometers, something like that. And basically, I got the idea from John Turk, who a lot of you may know, who's an amazing adventurer. He's done lots of great journeys. And I said to him, if you were going to kayak anywhere, where would you go? And he was like, well, if you don't mind surfing black bears, then I would go to Kamchatka. It's really stunning. So that's what we did. And here's a little video.
Kamchatka, a remote peninsula in Far East Russia. Two women are attempting to kayak 650 kilometers up the exposed east coast where there are no roads. They'll have to fend off Pacific surf, brown bears and the Russian military. But their biggest challenge is that they must take a Russian with them. Alexei Sitnikov has never been in a sea kayak before.
So yeah, that's absolutely true. Alexei had never been in a kayak before. And basically, to be able to do the journey, we were told by the authorities we had to have a Russian with us. And so I went over a little bit early and tried to find someone. We had to use a kind of a company to do the trip, and we had to pay Alexei to come with us. Luckily, not a lot. And so I took Alexei out on the sea, first of all, just to try and get a bit of training with him. And he capsized so many times. And I thought, oh my God, he's not going to come. He's not going to come. He's going to say, this is not going to happen. But basically what he did after this, we went out, we came back, and I said, so Alexei, what do you think? And he's like, oh, for me, this expedition is crazy. I'm thinking, no, he's not going to come. We won't be able to go. And he went, but I do it. And I was so grateful for him. Like, he didn't speak very good English, never been in a kayak before. And we had brought equipment for him to wear, but he had said he had his own PFD because he did actually do some raft guiding. And if you can see there, his PFD was really not that suitable for kayaking. It's really long and bulky, but it's a shame we could have brought him one. But anyway, he did well. He was great, a great sport. Kamchatka is so beautiful. It's in the Ring of Fire. You've got all these amazing volcanoes, and even in the summer when we went there, there's There's still snow. It's still quite cold at the beginning of the trip, but it's what a stunning backdrop. Really was absolutely beautiful. This is Hadass, my friend from Israel, and she really wasn't used to the cold. You can see she's very, very well wrapped up, and she spent a lot of her time like that. Yeah, and it was interesting because I think this was our very first night camping. We landed a bit early. We set up the tents, and this tank, this armored vehicle came and approached us, and they asked to see our permit to paddle, and we had one, so we showed it to them. And they were basically saying, well, sorry, this is not good enough. You have to come with us. You have to come with us on the tank. You have to pack down your tents and everything. And I think I've seen too many movies, and I was just worried that they would like put us in jail miles from the sea and we'd never get out again. So I was just like, no, we're not going. And Alexei is looking at me. They were like, these guys have guns and they're like telling us we have to go. And I'm saying, no. And Alexei's looking at me like, you can't do that. We have to go. And maybe they let us call the people we'd arranged the trip with on the sat phone, and they basically said, it's okay, you do have to go. So we got on the tanks, packed everything up. They took us for about an hour's ride to their base. And then Hadass and I basically sat outside on the tank for an hour while who knows what Alexei was doing. He went inside. He was probably drinking with them or playing cards or something. I have no idea. And then eventually they dropped us back in exactly the same place. Everything was okay. So that was kind of an interesting adventure right at the start. And yeah, it was kind of cool to have a ride on the tank once we knew that we weren't going to get locked away. You can see in the background there just a little bit of surf, and that's very typical. Like the whole way on the coast we had surf launches and landings almost every day. Yeah, it's also one of the largest populations of brown bears in the world. And we came to land on this one beach, and there was a bear there. And Hadass and I were thinking, well, we won't land there. There's a bear there. There were two bears there, actually. And Alexei was like, well, yeah, we will land here. The bears know we're here now. So we did. We landed there. And Alexei didn't have a gun permit, neither did we. So all we had was basically a flare and a whistle. So luckily, the bears all ran away when they saw us. So that was good. And yeah, the surf was pretty intense at times. Alexei took 2 or 3 swims, either launching or landing, but really he did pretty amazingly well, considering that, you know, as not being a paddler, having to put up with that every day, running the gauntlet. And he got much, much better as a paddler as well. So that was really great to see. It was interesting because I was the whip cracker on this trip. Like I had sort of arranged the time. We had 3 weeks to complete the distance, but I hadn't really allowed enough extra time for Alexei being a beginner paddler. And also in the mornings, like he was really slow to get ready. I think he was just trying to put off getting onto the water sometimes because it was hard work for him and potentially stressful. And so, we ended up kind of being worried about time, and I tended to be the one. Hadass is more relaxed and fun, and Alexei was just, you know, didn't really know what he didn't know. And so, yeah, I was always pushing a bit. And this particular point when Hadass took this picture, we had just stopped to take some video because there were some waves breaking and it looked dramatic. And then we were just setting off again, and Alexei was coming up to me and saying, Justine, he was telling me really the pace was a bit too fast and we were getting too tired. He was like, Justine, the sea is a dangerous place for tired man. And I'm thinking, oh, come on, Alexei, you big wind. You know, we've got all this distance to go. We've got to keep going, you know. And I turned to say something back to him and sort of along those lines. And the next minute, this wave comes from nowhere and it just literally breaks and it picks Alexei up. And 1 minute he's beside me saying, the sea is a dangerous place for tired man. And the next minute he's gone. There's a wave gone by and Alexei's in it. And I can't see him and I can't see him and I can't see him. And then eventually the wave recedes and I see him. And here's the picture here. Can you see in the first picture, you can see the stack there on the right. You can also see Alexei's got a red hat on. Then the next picture, here are the waves and Alexei's lost his hat. What's actually happened in this picture is Alexei got rolled, capsized by the wave. It knocked his hat off, but the wave rolled him back up again, luckily. So there he is upright. And then the next I see, he's upright and he's trying to get to his hat that's come off. He's trying to sort of sideways paddle to his hat, and the next wave's coming. And I'm like, Alexei, leave your hat. So he does, and he starts paddling out to sea. And I'm like, stupidly, I'll get it. And so in this picture, you can basically see me getting hammered by the next two waves as I'm trying to get his hat. And in the end, I left his hat. I was like, it's not worth it. I'm sorry, Alexei, you've lost your hat. We came back out to sea. And I was like, I don't know if I believe in serendipity or anything, but really, what a coincidence. The minute Alexei is saying, the sea is a dangerous place for tired man, a wave comes and smashes him away. And so we landed early that day and we got a good night's rest, and we carried on a bit more rested the next morning. And you can also see a bit, this is the pot on Hadass's kayak there. She basically, that got battered in surf landings when she got rolled and capsized. So yeah, it was pretty intense surf at times. We met some amazing people along the journey. Like there's no road between the two communities that we paddled between, but there's a lighthouse, and these two couples man this lighthouse 24 hours a day. They have the generator, they have to keep going. And it was amazing to spend an evening with them. We had also met some rangers to a park the night before, a few nights before, and they had given us some letters to deliver to these couples. And we got there, and we were the first people that they had seen for 8 months. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine how happy they were for us to come and stay? And the cool thing was we gave them letters, and this was in June or July. And one of the letters was a Christmas card, and one of them was a letter from one of the couple's sons. And it was so cool to watch them. They spent about 10 minutes arranging the cushions comfortably on the sofa, just so that they could sit down and fully enjoy the first news they had had from anyone for 8 months. So yeah, that was very, very special to be able to do that. So yeah, Kamchatka, amazing trip. Really, really beautiful place. Still one of my favorite trips. And when we got to the end of the trip, Alexei got to the end. I'm like, Alexei, how was it? And he's just like, no more water. But he did love it. He said it allowed it to see his country through new eyes, through a different way, from a kayak, a way he would never got to see it, which is, I think, what we probably all love about kayaking. You get to see things from that different perspective. It's very, very cool. Okay, so I didn't really tell you what I was going to talk about on this trip. You know, it's Sea Kayaking the World, and basically I've just picked a few of the trips that I've done, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about it. So yeah, the next one I'm going to talk a little bit about is Tasmania. Tasmania, just coincidentally, I happened to paddle around with the same two girls that did the beards and bikinis trip at the start. And so we started in Hobart, and we paddled clockwise. No, that's counterclockwise. We paddled counterclockwise around the island. And it's a beautiful island. It was a warm trip in general. But we ended up having a lot of headwinds. Like almost every day, it seemed to be a headwind. And it wasn't always so strong that we had to get off the water, but it was often strong enough that it was just hard work and quite demoralizing. And so we've spent quite a lot of the time off the water, just basically waiting for bad weather. And we ended up getting up really early. This is the first trip where I really got up very early, kind of got up in the dark at 4:30, on the water at first light at 6 o'clock, just because it wasn't windy in the morning and we could get a few hours paddling in before it got too windy. So we ended up doing that. And sometimes it would get windy, and we would sort of get off the water and hope it might drop before heading off again. And if that didn't work, we just end up putting the tent up. So yeah, it was a hard mental trip in that respect. Also, just Tris was not as keen to paddle into headwinds as Gemma and I. You know, that was the first trip where I really saw the importance of going with people with similar aims and goals to you. You can get on really well with someone, you can be really good friends, but if one person wants to paddle 50 miles a day and one person wants to paddle 5 miles a day, then it's going to be hard to compromise. So yeah, the first trip that I really learned that. And then one day was just particularly demoralizing. We'd been struggling, and we got on the water early and the wind just picked up 20 minutes later. And it's like, what do we have to do to be able to make progress here? At the time, it felt like a really big deal. It felt like the end of the world almost. It felt really unfair. And yeah, this is kind of what it felt like. Just like, give us a break, you know? And so, but we persevered, and that very same day that I was sulky about not making anywhere, the wind actually dropped. The wind dropped and we ended up having a beautiful calm most of the day, and we made a really, really good distance, and we had a beautiful, beautiful day on the waters. And I think it's just a good reminder. It's a good lesson for life as well. Even when things feel tough and you feel like things are just going to keep going and being hard, eventually, if you just keep plugging at it, things will improve. They will get better. So we carried on, and on the East Coast, it was windy. On the West Coast, we also had big swells. We had big swells coming in from the West Coast, and we were a bit nervous about it. And we were lucky that we got quite a gentle introduction. We had really good weather for a few days, and then we had the big swells. Fortunately, there are lots of places we can land. I say lots. You sometimes have to paddle 45 kilometers to get to the next place. But, you know, on a trip like we had, where we were doing big distances, you knew at least if you had a good day, you'd be able to get to a place where you wouldn't have to have a surf landing, which is, you know, important. Like, I love surfing for fun, but when I'm on a trip, I want to avoid surf. I've got a boat full of stuff. I don't want to risk injuring myself. I don't want to risk damaging the boat. So I try to avoid surf as much as possible on a trip. Yeah, we did have some pretty big swells. One day in particular, there was a buoy out there which registered 6 meters on this particular day. And we were paddling. That's the only time I've ever actually felt a bit seasick as well. At one point, we were paddling quite close to the cliffs, and there was lots of rebounding clapotis. You know, the waves kind of come up like this and pyramid and then splat down. I actually started to feel queasy. It was only because we then moved out into an open bay without the rebounding waves that I started to feel better. But these waves were so big, you know, you'd paddle side onto them and you'd look up at them and you go, I know they're not going to break. I know they're not going to break. The water's really deep. They're not going to break. It's fine. But every now and again, one of them would rear up just enough that you would go, I'm turning into it. I don't care. I'm turning into it just in case. They never did break on us, thank goodness, because they were massive, powerful waves. But so, another valuable lesson though, we were paddling from north to south and we were going into the place called Strawn there. And so this is when we had the 6 meter swell, but the swell's from the southwest. So if you can see the Macquarie heads there, that gave beautiful protection from the swell. So all we had to do was stay out to sea and then basically sort of come in close to Macquarie heads and then go in through that channel to avoid the surf. But we were so excited. We were coming into Strawn. We were coming into to a pub for the first time. We were meeting a friend there, and we were chatter away, and we got a bit too close into the surf zone. And actually, I noticed we were getting a bit too close, but at that time, I didn't want to be the one to tell my friends. We were all equals. Hey girls, you know, I think you're getting a bit close to the surf. Maybe you should come out of it. I would totally do that now, but I guess being a bit younger, being a bit newer to expedition paddling, a bit newer to sort of leadership and stuff like that, I didn't really say anything. I just hoped they would see me out of the surf zone and they would come to me. But they didn't. And a big wave came and it broke on them and it broke on Gemma and it knocked her out of her boat. And so Gemma is taking a swim. And Triss is close to her, and I'm there, and we're just on the edge of the surf zone, and we're like, oh shit, what do we do? And Gemma is just kind of sitting there too. She's not swimming to her boat. She's not really helping herself. And so basically I went to get Gemma, Triss went to get her boat. We thought we might be able to put her back in her boat because we are on the edge of the surf zone. But Triss and the boat get swept into the surf zone. So then I have Gemma on the back of my boat. I start heading out to sea, hoping Triss can meet us there, but that's not working. So then I turn around and go into shore with her, and we're getting closer. I'm looking behind me, and there's a big wave coming. I'm like, Gemma, you're going to have to get off my boat, because if that wave breaks, onto her and me together. It could be dangerous. She could hurt herself. I might not be able to roll if it knocks me over. And so Gemma lets go. This wave comes. I'm bracing into it. I'm bouncing. I'm bongo sliding along. And then I hear my phone that I have strapped to my front, my deck, start ringing. And I'm bouncing along, and I know exactly who it is. It's Matt, who we're meeting in Strawn in the pub because we're late. He's trying to figure out where we are. And I'm bouncing through this wave, hearing the phone going, I think you're going to forgive me, Matt, when I tell you later why I didn't answer you. And then the wave dies down, and I go back and I get Gemma and I get her on the boat, and then we see Tris and we head into shore. And Tris said that she tried to tow Gemma's boat in, and the tow line got caught and everything, and she ended up getting capsized, and she said it was just a nightmare, and she vowed never to use a tow line in the surf again. And so lots of lessons, lots of things to learn from. And also we basically lost a load of stuff out of Gemma's cockpit, out of Tris's cockpit, because they weren't tied in. And luckily the next day we went for a walk on the beach, and we managed to find most of the things that we lost, which was very, very lucky. Yeah. And so then we got back in the boats, we paddled around, we got to Strawn, and everything was good. We carried on from there, and we mostly had pretty good weather. We mostly were able to avoid the surf. And we enjoyed this incredibly beautiful scenery, these beautiful gannets coming over us. And it was just absolutely stunning. It felt like a great reward for all of the challenges that we had faced. And this is how I felt then, and I like to remember that that things do come around, if you might be frowning and feeling really sad one minute, but keep persevering and life gets good again. And so, this is us. We finished the trip, and I'm just going to show you a little video, hopefully, of that.
The winds gradually ease, and on our 36th day, we have a 40-kilometre crossing in dropping winds, before landing for what we hope is the last night of the trip.
Last campsite. So I'm all excited. And that means tonight I'm just going to eat everything that's left. And it's great because we can eat loads and loads and loads, but not sand. Can't eat. Do you think that's a bit piggish?
What, the whole thing of mashed potato all to yourself?
Yeah.
It's great.
This little bottle of wine has gone almost all the way around Tasmania, so we have to drink it tonight on our last night, otherwise it would have gone all the way around, and that would be a tragedy.
So to a successful last day.
With all the fears I saw in place, with all the doubts around his place.
After more than 5 weeks, we round the stunning Tasman Peninsula and pass beneath the famous totem pole.
The lights came to my way. Freedom.
The wind is finally behind us as we land for the last time in Tasmania. We've become the first women to continuously circumnavigate the island. 1,350 kilometres in 37 days.
Congratulations, girls. How do you feel?
Fantastic!
We did it! It's so cool.
This is the civilized version.
Yeah, exactly. Here we are in 5-week-old thermals. I noticed no one's getting very close. But we've got nice glasses.
Now, what's been the best paddling way, would you say?
Now? Yeah. About the last 5 kilometres.
Very excited at the moment. I hope it doesn't jump out of your hand.
Cold?
So that was Tasmania. It's fun. I haven't actually seen that little video for a long time myself. It was fun to see it. Don't I look young? That was a great adventure. Okay, so I've done lots of things after that, including kayaking around Haida Gwaii with the Queen Charlotte Islands on the west coast of British Columbia, which I have to say is also an amazing trip, so much so that I've done it twice now. I did it 14 years ago with my good friends Shauna and Leon, and then I did it last year with my partner JF in the opposite direction, so that was pretty cool. I paddled around the South Island of New Zealand, which is one of the most challenging trips that I've done in terms of swell and wind. Surf landings there were scary.
So let's see, we have a question if you always take your own kayak or if you borrow them, and then curious about the hard shell modular 3-piece kayak that you have.
Yes, I guess it depends. I'm kind of lucky from sort of traveling and filming all over the world that I have friends in lots of places, and especially when I was making the films, people would often be like, sure, you can use a kayak. So sometimes I would borrow them, obviously, like if I go to Australia or something like that. But New Zealand, we actually shipped hard shell kayaks out. Tasmania, we shipped one 3-piece kayak out. We flew it with us rather, and we got use of 2 other kayaks when we were there. I don't think we paid for that. I can't quite remember. And then sometimes I borrow them. When I went around the Queen Charlotte Islands the first time, I borrowed a kayak from my friends. Yeah, it really depends. And the 3-piece kayaks are great. And I now have bags for them. So the middle section is in one bag and the 2 end pieces are in a separate bag. But it's really expensive to fly with them these days, like airline. Typically it costs a lot of money, but then sometimes it's worth it to have your own kayak, which is maybe a better kayak than you might get elsewhere, and maybe still cheaper than renting a kayak if you're going on a long trip. Yeah, so it really varies. I try to, figure a different thing out depending on the situation.
Yeah, great. Sounds like there's a couple other people in the group that might have those kayaks or an experience with them. So good to hear. A question, at this point in your life, do you prefer solo journeys or traveling with others?
I prefer traveling with others, yeah. So the Iceland trip was a solo trip, and about 6 years ago, I did a solo trip around Vancouver Island. And at that time of my life, I was really ready for a solo trip. I'd done a couple of trips. A trip along the Aleutian Island chain with my really good friend Sarah, but who is slower than me, who is not as experienced as me, and a trip in Indonesia with someone that was in a slower boat. And I was desperate at that point to do things my own way again. But generally, I prefer company. I prefer sharing the experience with somebody.
That's great. Someone's wanting to know where you're living now.
So now I'm living in British Columbia on Vancouver Island on the west coast in Nuku'ut. Yeah, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Close by, not too far from us in Portland.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever come down to Oregon and paddle?
I haven't paddled in Oregon. I've driven through, but I've not yet paddled there. I'd like to.
Yeah. Well, let us know. I'm sure we can figure out something. So question, what did you like about the Haida Gwaii?
I just think it's really beautiful, and you've also got the added Haida culture, which is really interesting, like the mortuary poles and the old buildings, the old longhouses, and there's just great wildlife and a nice mix as well. Like the west coasts are very remote and wild and not very many people, and then the east coast there's a few more people. It's still beautiful. Yeah, I just really enjoyed the place. I think it's got just a special feel to it. I think it's probably the combination of the wilderness and the culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had a question. You had shown the picture of the bear. I'm curious, when you're out in the water, have you had any nerve-wracking sea life encounters?
A few. Yeah, well, one time I was in Baja in the Sea of Cortez on a trip paddling around Isla de la Ángel de la Garda with some friends, and we were watching some fin whales lunge feeding. There were 5 of us all close together. We kind of figured the whales knew where we were, and suddenly one of them came up right underneath my kayak. Literally, I did a draw stroke off the back of a fin whale. So that was pretty nerve-wracking. And it was fine. Like, I don't know, I guess he didn't know we were there, and I'm not sure if he felt me or not. I don't know if that would be significant for a whale, but there was no like, what is this thing? Flick it away. And yeah, I mean, I've had moments where I've seen sea lions a bit scarily close, and but I mean, nothing where I felt super threatened. I did a trip in the Canadian Arctic with my partner JF, and we saw a polar bear, which was kind of scary, but it was 200 meters away. We were on the water, and it was on the shore. So I think that's about as cool a polar bear encounter as you can get in terms of not being that scary. Different elements of a good distance away.
Yeah.
And I'm yeah, I mean, anytime you see a bear or a big carnivore that has the potential to, is stronger than you, bigger than you, is both nerve-wracking and exciting. I'm not as nervous about bears as I once was. I'm pretty used to them now. But yeah, plenty of excitement. Even had a sea otter once come and bite my kayak. It wasn't so much scary as like interesting though. If it bit me, it would have been different. But yeah, just bit my kayak. But yeah, I mean, wildlife is another reason why I think a lot of us love kayaking.
Yeah, exhilarating and scary kind of at the same time.
Yeah.
We have another question here. If you can talk about trips you offer with JF through Skills.
Yeah, sure. So my partner JF runs a company called Skills, which is based on Vancouver Island, and it's kind of different from a lot of kayaking companies in that we cater to people that already paddle. So we offer some guided trips, but they're for intermediate to advanced paddlers, and they tend to be a bit longer and kind of real adventures, if you like. So we did one this year. We did 2 this year. One was around the Brooks Peninsula on Vancouver Island, which, as many people might know, was one of the cruxes of paddling around the west coast of Vancouver Island. It sticks out kind of 8 miles. It's a very committing day's paddle. And that whole trip has quite a few committing days, but it's absolutely beautiful. And with a good group and enough time, we take 2 weeks to do it. Then we've done that trip twice now and successfully made it round and had a great time with everybody. And then we also did a 20-day trip around Princess Royal Island in the Great Bear Rainforest. And again, that was a beautiful trip. That was for the first time this year. And yeah, we paddle, probably 10 to 20 miles a day, closer to 10 most days, but some days it might be 20, 15, that sort of thing. And we also catch quite a lot of fish. So because a lot of the time we do a resupply, but we weren't able to do a resupply for that 20-day trip. So we make quite a lot of our own kind of dehydrated food beforehand, and we catch a lot of fish. We caught 13 salmon on that trip. So we ate very well. And yeah, they're just sort of trips that you might want to do and maybe don't have someone to do it with, or maybe you want the safety net of a guide, or maybe you want to be cooked for, or maybe you want to meet other people that are doing it. So yeah, they're kind of different to what most people offer. And they're super fun. That's, because that's what I love to do, is to go exploring and go on adventures. So it's nice to be able to share that with people as well.
That's great. Let's see. Go ahead.
We also do some trips down in the Chilean fjords and in Antarctica, which is a sailboat based in the winter. So that's pretty cool too.
Very cool. The question about what do you use to fish on those trips?
Well, we usually take a few collapsible rods, so they're telescopic, so you can put them away when you're not using them. And then for salmon, we just use spoons usually, or we're not using bait, we're just using lures, or maybe Shimano butterfly. And then for the salmon, we were mostly trawling, but we also often will jig for rockfish and lingcod. This particular trip, there was so much salmon, and JF loves this catching salmon that we basically we had one meal of lingcod, and I think all the rest was salmon. No one was complaining though.
Yeah, sounds delicious.
And sometimes we take hand lines.
Hand lines.
Hand lines as well. Just and people get to like, you know, if people want to fish, they can fish.
Very cool. Yeah, Mark had asked for the URL, so it looks like a couple of us popped that into the chat. So if people are wanting to visit the website and learn more, that's in there. If others aren't paying attention to the chat, and we're at 8 o'clock, but I didn't know if there's anything else you'd like to share, Justine, or if there are any last minute questions. Yeah, anything else you'd like to share?
I mean, no, I'm happy to ask more questions. I'm sorry my computer died. But to be honest, you just seen a few pictures of the Aleutian Islands, which is an amazing trip, but I was pretty much wrapped up anyway. So yeah. I'm very happy to take more questions if there are some. Otherwise I don't have anything specific to add.
Yeah, no worries about the technology, man. Everybody's been through the ringer, I think, with technology over the past couple of years. There is another question here. What's your personal favorite kayak to paddle?
I really like the Valley Attain for trips. That's my first choice for trips. It's got quite a lot of room, and it's pretty stable, but it's also nicely maneuverable. So that's my favorite trip boat. And for kind of playing, I like the Valley Gemini, and I also like the Sterling kayaks, like the Progression and the Reflection. They're a lot of fun and very